It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm Patrick Brown, your host and Better Made Chips addict, and we are thrilled to have you watching our humble show. For the past 5 years, you've caught our column with the Hockey Writers, and now we are here with you to discuss the latest Red Wings news, rumors, and strategies. Stop the presses. Not only are we at full strength this week, but we have a very special guest. In fact, probably the most, not even probably, definitely the most special guest we have ever had on this show. Joining us today, Igor Larionov II, a man who grew up with the professor as a father, and he has been beyond kind enough to join us today. Iggy, we can't thank you enough for joining. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure to talk some hockey and have a good time.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and looking forward to have some fun. So
of course,
next,
let's do it.
We've got the usual suspects with us, with our Grindline member with the best hair game by far, Devin. How you doing, Devin? Welcome back. We missed you last time.
Good to be back. You guys had a real good show last week. If you ever want any hair tips, you know who to call.
Well, you saw I
Yes,
tried.
yes,
I gave it the old college try. Didn't work out too well, but
Devin
I tried.
approved.
That's all that matters. And certainly last but not least, Kyle, always working on your year-round playoff beard, which I admire. So that's great. But how you doing? Welcome back.
Doing well. Got to keep the face warm at all times. So, I'm ready to go.
Good deal. Well, we've got a lot of ground to cover. And just for anybody returning watching, first of all, thanks for watching. We're going to do things a little bit differently today because we figure you probably want to hear more from the celebrity on our show as opposed to just us. So we're going to start with Iggy quite a bit, and we want to hear what he has to say and give us some shed some light on some things, and we'll see where it takes us. So jumping right in, last week we talked about Mo Seider, his accolades in the SHL Defenseman of the Year, Elite Prospect, and we were wondering what it takes to learn the game, not in a North American game, or maybe not in the professional leagues in North America, and then how does that transfer? So Iggy, you want to pick your brain a little bit here. How different is it? What type of adjustment does it take to learn go from the international game where you're really successful and have to try to convert that to the NHL?
It's the most difficult part about that, I'd say, is the ice, because obviously in Europe you play on an Olympic sheet. The ice is much bigger. You have a lot more time with the puck, so it's more of a possession-based game, whereas in North America it's way more of a reaction game. So, for example, let's say you beat someone out of the corner in Europe. Well, you still have a distance to go. You can still basically, somebody can still support you, and that one-on-0 will become a one-on-one or a one-on-two. In North America, if you make a mistake, you're at the net. There's nobody else there to defend you. So in terms of that, it comes at you quick. When you're used to having 2-3 seconds with the puck, now you're having half a second, 1 second, and that's probably the most difficult part. Also, I feel like in North America, a lot of teams are more structured on systems, whereas in Europe it's a bit more of a free-flowing style. So in terms of that, that's not too difficult to pick up. Systems are systems everywhere. So some teams just follow them a bit more strictly. So in terms of picking that up, it isn't too difficult of an aspect in terms of learning a different forward check or learning a different D-zone coverage. They're all pretty similar. So
sure,
for a player like that who's had success at European level and now at the World Championships and at the World Juniors, I don't think it's going to be that tough of an adjustment. So honestly, one of the things that, and I think he did play in the AHL already, which is another thing that is huge. A lot of guys say the AHL is a much harder league than the NHL. So I really don't think there'll be much of an issue. And to touch back on the AHL thing, I've talked to a lot of guys, probably 20 to 25 guys who've played both AHL and NHL, and the consensus is that the AHL is a much harder league to play in. And if you can play there, some guys struggle adapting, and it's not because they're not quick enough, they're not strong enough. It's more of the skill level. So there's a lot of skill guys that have trouble in the AHL because it's a quicker game, more physical. But when they get to the NHL, you play with better players that read the game at the same level as you do. So it's easier in terms of that. But I feel like Seider's a smart player and he won't have an issue, and he'll probably do even better in the NHL than in the AHL.
I love it. You heard it here first. The AHL is harder to compete in than the NHL. I love leading off with that. That's good stuff.
I'm sure Rachel would like to hear that.
Yeah, hopefully she's watching. So shout out, Rachel. Shout out. Thanks for joining. So I want to give Kyle and Devin a chance to follow up and either expand or maybe ask some questions if they have, but if they have their own questions. But just really quick, I'm curious. So what you let off with, you started talking about making mistakes and you kind of learned the hard way. All of a sudden in the NHL game, someone's all alone. How do you learn that? Is that you learn that because you screw up, or do you learn that you're taught and you practice? Like ultimately, how does that message get sent home?
You can't really learn that without actually playing the game. It's one of those things where you can prepare for it, you can practice for it, but when the game actually starts and you go from playing a 1-3-1 where everyone's clogging the neutral zone to a 2-on-2 with two guys just busting at you. It's one of those things where it's like you have to figure it out on the fly almost. And
sure,
if you're a smart player, if there's two guys coming at you, for me, that's an advantage. If there's two guys coming at me, because I know that one pass and there's two guys out of the play. So we have an odd man rush. So in terms of that, it creates a lot more opportunities for players. But at the same time, when you're used to having so much more time and space, it's kind of difficult at times, and it might take a little bit of, adapting. But if you've played in the AHL and if you've played at, against Canadian teams, American teams at international tournaments, it shouldn't be too tough of a process to switch over, because it's, at the end of the day, those teams play the same style regardless of the size of the ice. And, I feel like if you can handle that, you can handle the NHL.
I've got to say, it's pretty cool to see the thought process of a hockey player and how you went through all the different strategies just in your answer there. So
of course,
insight we've never had on this show, and really appreciate it. So Kyle, I'm going to toss it over to you really quick. If you have any thoughts on Seider's maturation into the NHL, or just any follow-up questions for Iggy.
Yeah, so I guess Iggy, just kind of touching on playing defense versus offense in the North American game versus the European game. Is it easier to transition back to the North American game as a defenseman? Is that part of the process that you think he'll be able to mature much quicker?
Personally, for me as a forward, I would say it's much more difficult to play Dzone in Europe. Because the size of the rink is a lot bigger, and because a lot of teams in North America, they play like, their setup system. You get the puck D to D to the net. In Europe, what can happen is the D can be at the front of the net, the forward could be at the blue line. Everyone's always moving and trading places. So because of that, it requires a lot of communication and a lot of talking while you're on the ice and you're in the D zone coverage. So a lot of times people get lost. But in North America, it's not that common that, you see a defenseman that ends up in the corner and a forward over there, and like everyone's spread out and on their position. When people are moving and not on their position, it creates a lot of tension, a lot of stress on the 5-man unit that's playing defense, because all of a sudden you're not in your set spots. You have to think, you have to adapt, you have to communicate. And I think coming back to North America, it could be quite easier in terms of, it's more of a simplified version of that. The only difference is maybe there's a little bit more battling, obviously, because the ice is smaller. And, as a young guy, that's not always the easiest thing, because, people mature at a different age. So I feel like Seider's a big guy, and he's probably physically mature, and he's only going to get stronger and stronger, as he gets to 24, 25. At that age, I feel like when you finally get into that, man strength, man body, and just looking at that, I mean, it shouldn't be too hard for him to adjust, because coming from a system where you have to have your head always open to something where it's more like, okay, we know what's going to happen, we just have to prevent it, is, in my opinion, is easier.
And that right there is why Red Wings fans are so excited about Mo Seider, because he's not even into his final form yet.
Yeah,
that is exciting, seeing the hurt that he was laying down quite a bit this past season in the SHL. So Devin, we don't want to leave you hanging on the outside here. So any thoughts or any follow-up questions for Iggy on Mo?
So I guess my question is, you spoke about how the European game is more free flowing, and then the North American game is kind of reactionary. You just talked about how you can have your defenseman down by the crease and your forwards up by the blue line. Is that just a product of like the ice being bigger and whatnot, or is that kind of is that a factor? But there's also like I guess is it something that you're taught when you're playing over there versus over here, or is it kind of just a product of the circumstances?
A bit of both. I mean, let's be honest, if you look at the Russian Five, they played the same exact way. That's why no one could stop them. You know, a lot of times it would be, Konstantinov on a breakaway. How often do you have a defenseman having a breakaway nowadays? Not too much, unless it's just, a straight up end-to-end rush or someone's coming out of the penalty box. So in terms of just understanding the difference between the ice here and the ice there, sure, that might be a difference because people have more time and space, so they're not as worried about, getting pinched off or something. They're gonna, create more and skate more. But that system definitely works here. And even if you look at like Tampa, for example, the Kucherov line and Hedman, they're all moving themselves. You look at Chicago back a couple of years ago, Duncan Keith was always, active in the attack. So it does happen more common there, I feel like. But at the same time, if you look at the best teams in North America over the years, they're playing the same system. It's just not all four lines are playing that system. It's usually the skill guy, the skill guys. But in reality, there's really not much skill involved in just having your head up and passing the puck. Everyone thinks skill is toe drags, picking it up over the net and doing one of these things. Well, no, that's just, that's parlor tricks. The real skill is actually the hockey IQ, the vision, the understanding of the game, and reading your teammates. That's the true skill. Like, you look at the Russian Five, those guys, they didn't do anything out of the ordinary skill-wise. You put them against a U15 player right now on an open sheet of ice. Those guys are doing all these flips and tricks. Those guys could never do that. But what they could do is read the game, have a huge amount of hockey IQ, and understand how to play the game the right way. And that's why they were so great. So in terms of understanding a coach's mentality, it's skill and hockey IQ is a very different thing. And I think that people need to start to understand that a bit more.
So the cross style goal does not impress you, is what you're saying.
I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see, and don't get me wrong. It's cool to see, but at the same time, if someone does that and they say this skill is out of this world, no, it's not out of this world. Skill is out of this world when you come into the zone, get three guys on top of you, make a no-look pass to someone, and you create a 2-on-1. That's real skill. Or real skill is when you do a tic-tac-toe passing play, doing drop passes, open up. That's real skill. Doing a lacrosse trick that any 12-year-old playing AAA hockey can do isn't real skill.
So
I love it.
It's funny. I was going to segue into, and I am going to segue into the Red Wings assistant coach position that's open because obviously they brought back Blashill. Bilesma was not invited to return. And my actual segue is I want to talk about potentially your dad filling that role. But before I say that, I might want to ask if you want to fill that role because my goodness, was that some good stuff right there. I like it.
Only as a player coach. Only.
Oh, there. I like it. So seriously now, the Wings have an open assistant coach position that for all intents and purposes is in fairly high demand. You've got a rebuilding team, but kind of coming up out of it, it looks like. You've got a position that may be next in line if Blashill doesn't work out. A lot of names are being floated around. We're going to talk a little bit about some other names later in the comment corner, but one that personally I wanted to know and I'm super interested in that has been on the top of my mind is your dad, Igor Larionov. Obviously, he's proven himself in the coaching ranks, doing very good things. What do you think about the possibility of your dad maybe ending up as the Red Wings head coach or assistant coach? Freudian slip. But and on top of that, do you think it's something he would entertain?
Right now, I don't think it would be possible because he signed on for the next World Juniors and through the Olympics, which he's working for the Russian Ice Hockey Federation. But as an assistant coach, I know he's had offers throughout the years to be an assistant coach, but I think he's the type of coach or the type of person where that kind of guy can't really be an assistant coach. You can't really have Wayne Gretzky being an assistant coach. You can't have Michael Jordan being an assistant coach. You can't have the great of a sport being an assistant coach, because at the end of the day, anyone's going to come into the locker room and they're going to look at him as the main man, regardless of who the coach is, just because of what he's accomplished, what he's done. And that creates a power dynamic that most head coaches wouldn't want to take on, I believe. So he's had the offers over the years, and I just don't think those could work, because if I'm a player and I'm talking to a guy who played college hockey at his highest level, or I'm talking to one of the greatest hockey players of all time, who do you think I'm going to listen to?
It's true.
And
so you're telling me you would take Wayne Gretzky's opinion over mine in hockey, is what you're saying. I would too, by the way.
I mean, that's just how you got to look at it, because a lot of times, if I'm just looking at it from the perspective of a player.
Sure.
If I have an all-time great on my bench versus someone who just maybe played a couple of years in the minors. It's one of those things. Hockey is very you got to respect sort of like your elders and who's accomplished more. So even as a coach, if you have someone like that in the room, you're always going to feel like that person is above you. So it would be difficult. But also, my father's style is quite different to most North American coaches. So that could be a bit of a conflict of interest, where he's trying to play, the offensive, the fun style that, a lot of goals, the one that sells tickets and makes money for the team. Whereas other coaches, they just want to lock it up. And, if they lose 1-0, they're not going to risk it. And that doesn't make anyone happy. If I'm a fan, I'd rather lose 6-5 than lose 1-0. I'd rather be entertained if we're going to lose. So because of that, it could be difficult. But as a head coach, I definitely think he could make a difference and quite honestly change the game from where it is now to something that it could be, and that is a much more entertaining, much more offensive, free-flowing type of style that we all saw from the Russian 5-inch that is slowly coming back, but it needs that final push to truly dominate the hockey world.
I was going to say, you said he could change the game, and well, he did it once before.
Yeah,
he definitely did it once before. And you talked about his style, his coaching style, not necessarily being popular in the North American game. Well, his playing style wasn't popular, and then it became awfully popular in the early to mid 90s. So I think that's really good perspective. Quick follow-up from me before I kick it over to Kyle and Devin. Do you see him ever potentially becoming a head coach in the NHL, whether or not it's with the Wings? Anywhere?
I think that's his biggest goal in his life is to do that. But it all depends on future tournaments. So let's say they win the World Juniors, or if Russia and decide to take them to the Olympics or something, and they do well there, then that opens up pretty much any door. So personally, I'd love to see that happen. I think anyone that loves hockey should love to see that happen, because it'll just make the game so much better. And I think it has to happen, because at the end of the day, it's show business. Hockey is show business, and if you're going to make the game more entertaining, then you're going to grow the sport. You're going to make more money as a league, but also if you're playing the style, which was proven to work, you're probably going to win some games too. And
absolutely,
that's just a win-win-win scenario,
Absolutely. Iggy, I'm going to give you a quick break, and I'm going to ask Kyle and Devin some questions, just so I feel bad for making you talk so much. But Kyle, same topic. Let's quickly chat about assistant coaches and who you think might be good candidates to potentially fill the role.
Yeah, and actually, Iggy brings up a great point with having another head coach mentality in that locker room. And that might have been what we were seeing with Blysma in Detroit this year. I mean, he won a cup with Pittsburgh, and Blashill has not won a cup. So that could have been where some of that tension came in, where Blysma was kind of trying to butt in a little more out of, kicking out of his coverage, I guess, so to speak. So in that sense, I think we need to bring someone in that's a little more under the radar or still working their way up the ladder. And, like you said, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show, but one of our commenters brought up a really good person in Ben Simon down at the Grand Rapids Griffins, and how he's really turned around their power play. And that's something that the Wings really need to address in the offseason is
they do.
How can they amp up that power play? So
Sure.
So that would be where I would lean right now, is bring someone in that's still working up the ladder, give them a chance as the power play specialist, and let them see what kind of creativity they have with the young guys.
Absolutely. Devin, toss it over to you. Your thoughts on the assistant coach vacancy.
I'm not going to lie, hearing Iggy talk about how his dad is probably better positioned to be a head coach kind of broke my heart a little, because he was definitely at the top of my list. Now, that being said, I do think there are plenty of candidates out there that can find various levels of success. I think Kyle hit the nail on the head that you probably want to find someone who is a bit more of a fresh face and still kind of working their way up.
Sure.
As much as it would be cool to have, like a Rick Tocchet alongside Blashill, there is kind of that conflict of interest that we're kind of touching on here, and you don't necessarily want that. That very well could have been a big reason why the power play and other things weren't working for the team this year. So I want to see, I don't have names in mind yet. Hint, hint, we have a Grindline article coming out this week, and I have not put in my entry yet. So
you have not.
No,
the time is ticking.
TikTok, I know. But I do have names, and I'm not quite prepared to throw one out yet. But
okay,
there are definitely some good candidates out there.
Good stuff. Well, for everybody watching, you heard it here first. The assistant coach will not be Tocchet, Larionov, or Gretzky. So we've got that. And I know Gretzky's busy with TNT now anyways.
Yeah.
But good stuff. We'll take a quick timeout. Want to thank you guys for watching our show. Give us a like, subscribe to the Hockey Writers channel. We've got so much good stuff on there. We've got Blackhawks banter, Saber Scoop, Chicks and Sticks, and always the OG show with Mark Sheg, who has the who's who of the hockey world on. Although selfishly, I'm going to say we won this week. But follow us on Twitter, sign up to our new morning newsletter, get the best hockey news delivered right to you. And again, we really appreciate you taking time, checking out our podcast. We really like it. So thank you for that. And let's get back to it. I just want to talk about one more thing before we jump into some comments from our last episode, as well as wrapping the show up with some questions for Iggy from our Twitter fans. But before we jump into that, it was actually Devin brought up a really good topic for this week. And Iggy, love watching you interact on Twitter, not just with your fans, but even with your dad, which is you guys have a fantastic electronic relationship too.
Oh, of course.
So actually he's super savvy. I sure my dad is watching. I love you, Dad. I just can't imagine you on Twitter. So tip of the cap there. But, it kind of makes us think about the characters in the NHL, if you will. The more, the more outgoing, passionate, they've got their sellies down and everything else. And I don't necessarily think you see as much of that in the NHL as you do in like Major League Baseball or the NBA or the NFL. So question, especially because your approach, Iggy, is so often lighthearted. And I mean that as a compliment. Does the NHL need to be a little bit more lax on celebrations and the types of characters? Or are they in a good spot with how the league is represented?
No, I think that 100% the league needs more, storylines, more characters, more personality, because at the end of the day, most people watch or start watching sport because of a human connection to something, a person-to-person connection. Usually it comes from being from a city or something, but just growing up as a kid, I remember I started watching basketball because, I saw this player. I'm like, okay, like he passes the ball out. I'm a passer in hockey. He dresses a cool way. I want to dress this way. He listens to this kind of music. I want to listen to this kind of music. So it's just like things like that, where when you show a personality and you do a little bit extra, it can go a long way, especially with kids, with so many different fans and people that love a sport, and they want a reason to cheer for you. They want a reason to believe in you, and they want a reason to love you, because at the end of the day, Sure, the sport is great, but if you look at the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, there are so many storylines that are created off the field, off the court. Like, for example, this year there was a game where I think it was Kendall Jenner's two ex-boyfriends playing against each other. And that game had more views than an NHL Stanley Cup final game. And that had nothing to do with it being, a good game or anything. Sure, it was a good game, but like the off the court story brought in a huge amount of watchers, of listeners, and it created a ton of traffic. So that's why I think in hockey we definitely need, people with more personality. You look at a guy like Kuzma on the Lakers. He's a role player. He has more followers than every single NHL team, the league itself, and every NHL player. That's an issue that we have to address, because at the end of the day, right now, social media is the number one thing of exposure, of branding.
Mm-hmm.
And when the league and the players don't have a high following on social media, well, that means their branding and their marketing isn't going in the right direction. So yeah, I do think that we need more characters. And if you were to ask me who my favorite, character or person in NHL is, I honestly probably couldn't name you a single one. That's how bad it is.
That speaks volumes there, to be honest. What about, I'm sure people watching want to know, and it's not fair because of your background, because you were drawn into hockey naturally, but who was your favorite player growing up, like character wise? Was there anybody you liked to follow, whether it was from a distance or in the locker room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, only one, and that would be Sean Avery.
Avery.
Okay.
Certainly makes sense.
Didn't take you as an agitator.
And it's honestly not because of the way he played or anything. It's all the stuff he did off the ice.
Sure.
Yep.
If you look at his career off the ice, he interned at Vogue, which I think is incredible for any athlete to do something like that. That's the biggest, company in the fashion world in terms of, magazines. Like I can't even compare that to anything. It's like, I don't know. It's like if you're working at the grocery store and you intern as a first line center for the Detroit Red Wings, it's like that's how big that is.
Sean Avery actually did a cameo for my cousin's hockey team a year or two ago, and it was a hoot, man. It was fantastic. Awesome. So
and
that's
now
awesome.
You look at him, he's in so many different movies. He was just in a Christopher Nolan film, which I think there's only 10 people with speaking roles in that film, and those are all like big time actors. And it's Sean Avery.
Yeah,
he wore sunglasses in his team photo. He was the first North American athlete to openly support gay marriage, which at the time was incredibly grave and incredibly out there.
Huge deal.
And not too many people remember that. But also, besides that, he did stir up some drama, which at the time, the league, instead of, pushing that, they sent him to rehab for anger management, which, I mean, all he said was something about, a former player going after his ex-girlfriend, which, I mean, who hasn't said something like that in their lifetime? And instead of using that as a marketing opportunity for creating the clash next time those teams play something huge, what they did was they sent him to rehab for anger management, because the old man's club can't have someone showing personality, can't have someone being upset. And that's sad, because that's a great opportunity to grow the sport. And you look at him right now, that's probably the one person throughout, hockey that I always look up to. And it's not even because of what he did as a player. I respect him as a player. I think that the Avery rule was great. I thought he was a great player in his own right, but everything he did off the ice is just incredible. And I read his book, and he actually texted me a couple of weeks ago, wanting to grab lunch. So I'm excited to meet him and just, pick his brain, because a lot of what he did off the ice is very, it's a lot of stuff that I'm really curious about. And I think there should be more people like that in the hockey world.
That's awesome. And I have to say then, Iggy, if the player coach doesn't work out, I think you might have a shot at director of marketing for the NHL. I think you might have a shot.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Possibly even
I could do both.
Keep that one in mind. Kyle, Devin, want to hear from you both too, really quickly about, and it doesn't have to be super long or anything, but what are your thoughts on showmanship, if you will, in the league? Does it need more?
So I'll start. I definitely think that there needs to be more personality. I mean, look at all the interviews now. It's always the same cookie cutter approach to everything. The times that the players do show emotion, they often get chastised online. sometimes it can be taken a little too far. You get your Jordan Binningtons that just kind of are going off the deep end every game. But, it's good. And it's great for the fans. And it does kind of build that like sense of pride in your fan base, or you have that like fan ownership of that team then. And their personality is then your personality. I mean, as a bad example, I guess, but look at how although Capitals fans come to the aid of Tom Wilson, no matter what he does all the time, because they see him as their identity. And so I think having those players with the personality, granted they need to be good personality players, I think that's going to be healthy for the league.
Yeah, well, I think, by the way, if you have more persona in the league, you're going to get both sides of it. I don't think you can only say we want good personalities. You're going to get both sides of it. So you certainly need to keep that in mind. But for what it's worth, great points, and I couldn't agree more. Devin, you get to bring us home on this one. Your thoughts on upping the game, the personalities.
Two things real quick. One, to Iggy's point about if you asked him what his favorite player was, whatever, he probably couldn't tell you. I think that if you asked a general sports fan who the best player in the league is, they would not be able to tell you Connor McDavid's name. And I think that kind of highlights a big problem with the NHL. Connor McDavid is arguably the best player we've seen since Gretzky. And people don't know his name. And that's not because he has a stale personality, because watch him play, he's electric. You can really lean into a talent like that and make him a worldwide known person, and he's not. And that's a failure on the NHL. Second thing, what is our show called? It's the Grind Line. Those were all some pretty colorful characters, right? Especially like Darren McCarty and Chris Draper. And fans rallied around that. Anytime those guys were on the ice, the Joe was rocking. And to your point about like Tom Wilson, and you got Brad Marchand over in Boston, even though those guys get under other teams and others' fans' skin, the fans that watch those players play on a daily basis gravitate to those guys, and they love them, and they buy their jerseys, and they even after they've been retired for a decade, they still go, oh man, I love that guy to death. And that's what we need more of. We need, whether they're a skill guy like McDavid or a guy who just throws his fist like Darren McCarty, you can get behind those guys, and it doesn't have to be because they say some silly stuff off the ice. It can be because they do crazy stuff on the ice too. But the best case scenario, in my opinion, is to have it both ways. But
for sure. And so to your point, I think to kind of bring this one home, I can think of, and me being in Phoenix, I always go when the Wings are in town once a year. Obviously this year it didn't happen, but to go to the game. And you know how many McCarty, Draper, Holmstrom sweaters I see at the arena still to this day. And it's because of what you guys said, Niggy, what you said, you identify with these players. The Red Wings of the late 90s and early 2000s, they were that group. You identified almost with the city. You put on your hard hat, you grabbed your lunch pail, and you went to work, and the city identified with that. And, we became closer because of it. So I think all really good points there, and appreciate the input on that. So let's get to our last two segments here. First, we want to acknowledge all of our folks watching, commenting, interacting. We appreciate all the comments. We're having a really good time going back and forth with everybody, and certainly want to give a few shout outs and make sure Iggy gets a chance to answer the questions that you put in our podcast last week. So let's start with the Paradox Destroyer. Love the name. The Paradox Destroyer suggested, I think what most of us are all thinking, a potential Nielsen buyout this offseason. I think there's a fairly good chance we'll see that happen. Some folks wanted it to happen last year after Bertuzzi went to arbitration, but I don't think it would have made sense. And obviously Yzerman agreed. But so ask me first is the moral of that story. But let's hypothetically say that doesn't happen and Nielsen doesn't get bought out. Iggy, would love your perspective on what it's like. It's been a hot topic, the young kids cracking the lineup past couple of years, and
Yeah.
Seems like it's been hard because they've been buried behind the Nielsens and the Helms of the world. And I mean no disrespect, but as a young player, what's your mindset? How frustrating can it be if you see a guy like Nielsen in front of you next year?
Yeah, I mean, myself personally, I know I'll be at an NHL camp this summer, and when I see a guy like that, the first thing in my mind is, and I don't mean this in a negative way or in a bad way, I look at him and I think, I'm taking your job, I'm taking the food off your table. That's how I'm looking at this person, because to me, I don't care. I don't care if you have a family. I don't care if you have kids. I want to take your spot, and I'm going to prove I'm going to take your spot. So, as a young guy, I think that's the mentality you have to have. Thank you for what you've done for the club. Clap you off when you get bought out or traded. But I'm here to take your spot. I'm here to work hard, and I'm here to be the best I can be. So, if you're a young player and you don't have that approach, you don't have that mindset, well, then I think you're in the wrong place, and you don't deserve a spot. If you're looking at these guys like, wow, like, can I have your autograph? Can I have your picture? Yeah. You're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. If you look at this guy as, this is my competitor until he becomes my brother, then you're going to make it.
Do you ever find yourself I don't want to say starstruck, but like, do you find yourself being sometimes a fan and you got to snap yourself out of it?
Honestly, not really. It's okay. When I see someone that is a good player or a famous player, for example, like when I was in the KHL, I played against players that, I watched on TV. Like it's cool. But at the same time, if there's a 50-50 puck, just because I watched you on TV doesn't mean I'm not going to try to knock you over and take that puck away from you. So sure. When I see a guy that, if anything, it makes me go even harder against them, because I want to prove to myself that, like, I remember, I could play with them. Like this year we were playing my first game of the season against Spartak. They had Sergei Shirokov. He's an Olympic champion, 2-time world champion, played in the NHL for a couple of years. And there was a loose puck in the corner, and he's a veteran, but I don't care. I'm going to win that battle. And I get the puck and I do a reverse hit and knock him over. He didn't see it coming from a young guy to do a reverse hit, but that's just my mentality. I don't care who you are. If you're in my way, I'm going to try to stop you. And that's how a young player should look at that. Like, you look at Nielsen, you look at Helm, you look at these guys, you can't blame them for taking the contracts they took.
Well, of course.
They're good guys. They're looking out for their family.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, when you're giving, someone who's at the back nine of their career that kind of money, that's just what typically happens. And that's, you can't blame anyone for that. The human body isn't meant to, sustain a high level of, athletic ability for so long. There's going to be a drop off, and the guys that can transition from using their physical qualities to their mental qualities in terms of reading the play, their skills, those are the guys that can play on and on and on. Look at Joe Thornton. Sure, his production has dropped, but he can still play the game because he's so smart. But Darren Helm's always been known for speed. When you lose your speed, what are you going to do? And I think Helm's a great guy. He's a great player, but it's honestly, it's putting the player in a position to fail when they're signed for such a long term.
Yep.
But going back to young players, you got to go in there. You got to take someone's spot, and that's the mentality you got to have.
Sure. Well, two things. First of all, I don't blame Nielsen for the contract. I blame Ken Holland. Let's be clear. I blame Ken Holland. But overall, I think I'm just curious. One last question: How do the good players, how you framed it up before, how do they respond to that? How did he respond to that reverse check? Any negativity around that, or it's just that's hockey and you play on? Do you lose something there because of your youth?
Honestly, no. There's another guy in that game, Sergei Zubrev. He's also an Olympic champion, played in the KHL for a long, long time. He might have come over to the NHL, I'm not sure. But I was with him in Scott 2 years ago. We were line mates. He was a defenseman because they do 5-man units in Russia. We were line mates in preseason. We played a couple preseason games together, and he was a nice guy. He was like 34 at the time. He sort of was looking after me, and just an all-around good guy. And we were playing against him. He was on Spartak now, and I had the puck going into the zone, and he tried to pinch me off, and I sort of spun around him and gave him a little check, and he bounced right off of me. After the game in Russia, it's sort of like in Europe where players almost exchange sticks, exchange jerseys on the ice. He comes up to me and he's like, "What have you been doing this summer? I bumped into you. It's like bumping into a concrete wall." For him, he was just super proud of he saw me 2 years ago when I was, I think maybe 20 or something. And he was just proud of me that I got to the point where I was playing well. He couldn't knock me off of the puck, and he just said, keep working, keep playing. You're a good player. And I'm so glad to see that, you're playing well and you're in a good spot. So he took it really well. And I think as an older player, you sort of have that responsibility to sort of nurture the younger guys. And at the same time, you don't want to give anything away, but when it's a fair competition and someone gets the better of you, I don't think you should be negative. You think you shake their hand, say, you know what, you did a good job. And that's how a veteran player should be, regardless of, the team they're on. Because at the end of the day, I was pretty much a rookie and he was pretty much won everything in hockey besides the Stanley Cup. So
and to your point, I mean, I think sometimes you just got to tip your cap to that effort too and respect it. So that's fantastic. I could sit here, I could listen to story after story, and I wish I could be so lucky, but we'll move on. And Devin, Kyle, I don't think the Paradox Destroyer cared what you had to say about it anyway. So our next comment on our last show, Matthew Markham commented on Blashill's attitude, which was something we didn't talk about with him being rehired. His even keel approach, his you can't worry about what you can't control. And so Iggy, again, coming right back to you, I'm curious, how much impact does the coach, in terms of his attitude, how much impact does that have on not just the team, but especially the young players on the team? Are you looking to that?
I think as a coach, you have to have always a stable attitude. You can't be one way or another. Imagine you're on a plane and you hear your pilot, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the flight. Like, typical voice. But imagine you get in the plane and this guy, ladies and gentlemen, like he's acting totally. You're gonna panic. You're gonna panic. You're not gonna say it.
It's true.
It's the same thing with the coach. A coach needs to be calm, cool, and collected at all times. Sure, you can get passionate at times. That's perfectly fine. Your players want to see that you care. But if before battle or before a game and at any moment a coach shows any signs of doubt, any signs of just not being calm and a leader, people are going to question you a bit. So that's why I think if someone says he's too calm or something, well, that might be kind of good for young players, because if a young player is nervous and they see that they're the person that they have to have their faith in is calm before the storm, that could calm them down a bit.
I love the pilot analogy. That's phenomenal. But we're not going to Chicago.
Exactly.
Good stuff. Kyle and Devin, I'm going to toss it to you guys super quick for your thoughts. So Blashill's attitude, we didn't really touch on that last week. Your thoughts on how much that played into Yzerman bringing him back. Kyle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Iggy definitely hit everything we needed to touch on there, that it's important, especially for the younger kids, and to have that control going into a game, to show that confidence, to show that, just the confidence you have not only in your players, but as your systems and as in your game plan and in what you plan for that game. There is one question I want to throw to Iggy. Who is one coach in the NHL that you, no matter where they were coaching, you would love to play for?
It's a very interesting question. There might be even two coaches, I would say, or maybe even three. I would say Joel Quenneville, because his teams are always playing, a fun offensive style. And then another one would be John Cooper, because obviously they also play a very offensive, quick style. And lastly, I would say maybe Todd McClellan, because my dad has a good relationship with him, and he's always talked very high of him and said he understands the game very well. So those are probably the top three coaches that I look at, and I'm like, I'd be down. I'd be excited to play for those guys.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that.
Awesome.
Of course.
Kyle's going to put me out of work. So
he always be competing, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, he already took your advice seriously about I'm coming for your job already. So thanks for that. Devin, bring us home on that. Your thoughts on Blashill's attitude and what he brings to the team.
Real quick on Blash's attitude, I think that all the points that were already said, I think are dead on. All you have to do is look at comment boards on Columbus, like the Blue Jackets with Tortorella, and like the Flames with Daryl Sutter, to know that you can kind of get rubbed the wrong way when your coach is not even keeled. But then I do want to have a kind of a follow-up question on that to you, Iggy. I'm coming for your job, Pat.
Everybody, you want to be a host? I'll be the Oprah of hosts. You be a host. You be a host.
Going back to the old days when we used to rotate. No, my question is kind of to what I was just saying with, like, you know, the Tortorellas and the Sutters and so on and so forth that kind of have that abrasive reputation. As a player, I guess A, have you dealt with any coaches like that? And then B, what kind of goes through your mind when you've got a coach, you know, say you've got coach A that is super even keeled, and then you've got a coach that is not afraid to throw you under the bus if need be.
Yeah, it's kind of it's funny when people talk about these coaches, calling them very like difficult and hard. In Russia, they'd seem like the nicest people in the world.
That's good.
It's like people don't really understand what, you know, hard coaching is until they play over there. And even like when Mike Keenan came over, everyone called him Iron Mike. They were all scared of him. And in Russia, they thought he was the easiest coach they've ever had, you know. So it's kind of funny how that happens. But yeah, I had in Scott, we had a couple of really, you know, hard-nosed coaches. Our head coach and our strength coach was, you know, kind of crazy. He was like demanding a lot from us and very intense, and not many people, you know, reacted well to that. I think that sort of coaching is history. It's past its prime. And if you look at modern day players, a lot of them are millennial Gen Z, and that doesn't really work with people these days. You have to sort of, you know, be cool with them. Obviously, so there are some people still that can get the best by lighting a fire under their ass.
Sure.
But there's also players that, you know, when you make a mistake, you have to come up to them. You have to say, you know what, I believe in you, pal. Like, you still got this. Go out there, keep working. And that could work a lot better for someone compared to, you know, yelling at someone or, you know, berating them in front of the locker room. So it all depends on the player. That's why I think a coach's biggest job is to sort of being like a de facto therapist, where you understand your players' needs and how to approach them. Because I've met a lot of coaches that it's hockey and it's hockey. There's no human connection to that. And if I'm going to play for you, I need to know that you believe in me. I need to know that, you know, you cherish me, not only as a player, but as a human being. Sure. And I think that really comes from talking to your players, spending time with them at the rink, you know, knowing how's your family, knowing and stuff about them, and just that human connection where I'm gonna work for you because I know you care about me. And that's the type of thing that I feel like a lot of people my age would appreciate, and guys slightly older. And just a quick story. One of my friends, his dad is the Kings GM, and his name is Jack.
Just dropping that one right in there. Okay, cool. All right, just keep going. All right, that's cool. I guess when your dad's the professor, you can just drop those things. That's cool.
It's funny you say that, but my friend group here, all of our dads are, you know, someone in the hockey world. So we joke around.
Sure.
We joke around. If you want to be in our friends group, you have to, you know, have your dad be someone. But anyway,
show your credentials.
He was saying that when I think it was Dean Lombardi was the GM and Sutter was the coach. So my buddy's name is Jack, and Lombardi and Sutter would call him Jacob, or they would call him Jackson or Jimmy, and he was too scared to correct them. Oh. And his dad, who was the assistant general manager, was also too scared to correct him. So that's why I think when, you know, that kind of approach, it doesn't work anymore when you're too afraid to even say something like, you know, actually my name is Jack. It's not Jackson. It's not Jimmy. So that's why you want to have a coach that you want to go to battle for. And that's something that's, you know, I think is becoming more popular. A lot more coaches are like that.
Devin, you got a really good story out of your question, so you might be putting me out of work. I don't know. One more comment corner before we jump into a specific Q&A for Iggy to wrap our show. We alluded to it earlier in the show about the assistant coach, and Kyle, I'm actually going to start with you this time, believe it or not, because you brought up. So one of our commenters, Sean Evans, asked about Ben Simon potentially filling in the assistant coaching role. And Kyle, you brought him up, so we're actually going to kick it over to you right now and get your thoughts on potentially Ben Simon filling that vacancy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'll keep it short, but I think it's a good hire to bring someone up, give him the next shot up the ladder. You know, he's been doing well in Grand Rapids, and can come up and be the assistant to Blash for the next couple of years and kind of get that NHL experience, and then also hopefully revive that power play. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that Grand Rapids power play over the last couple of years has continuously gotten better, and he's seen a lot of these young guys that are going to be coming up as well. So he already has that connection there, like Iggy brought up, that personal connection. So I mean, if we're keeping it within house and really trying to build, within Yzerman's vision, I think Simon would probably be the next step in the coaching process.
Sounds good. Good points. We'll flip it over. Devin, we'll get your thoughts first and then have Iggy bring us home.
Simon is probably, for lack of better words, the safe option. I think a lot of teams do that where they kind of, if they have, especially if it's an assistant coach, because then there's not as much pressure. If they have a guy that's shown well in the AHL, they can bring him up and kind of progress him as a coach, right? And I'm not against it at all. Love my Griffins, love my Griffins coaches. So if and Simon's done well, like Kyle just said, their power play's gotten better, and if the Red Wings need a good power play. So if he can translate that, then I'm on board with it. I don't know that he's at the top of my list, but he's on the list for sure.
Sure. Very good. And the only opinion that matters on this week's show, I should say. Bring us home, Iggy. I don't know if you have any experience with Ben, even from afar or up close, but your thoughts on him potentially filling that role.
Yeah, I personally don't know him, and I don't have enough information to, say he's a good coach or the right fit or, anything on that. But I will say that it's always a good option to bring someone in from your own system because they are familiar with players, especially if you're in the middle of a rebuild where in the future, most of the players will be guys that he's already worked with. That is a major, stepping ground that you can jump over right away, because usually the first step is to get to know players, is to understand their game. But if you can jump over those two steps and you already know what you have, what you're working with, that's a major plus. So yeah, I mean, I really don't see any problems with bringing in someone that is familiar with the players, is familiar with the system, and familiar with the club's values. So I think that's, it's always a good hire.
Good stuff. All right. Well, let's have a little fun to bring our show home. Kyle and Devin, you guys are off the clock. You can crack open a cold one or whatever you need to do, because we're going to get just a little time from our Twitter followers, Iggy, who had some questions for you. So the first one is from @BlanePotvin _THW. I wonder who he writes for. And the question is, and full disclosure here, I know you did not play in China because of the pandemic. You played in Russia, but Little Birdie told me you do have some experience with some folks who have played in China. So I still wanted to ask the question. What have you heard about the hockey fan base in China? What is interest in Beijing compared to in other sports? And again, I know you haven't played there, but was curious your secondhand knowledge on that.
Yeah, so the biggest story that all the guys would tell me when I asked them about playing in China was their first game ever in the KHL at home, sold out crowd. And after the first period, everyone left because they thought the game was over. That should tell you everything you need to know about of hockey and the fan knowledge and everything else going on in China.
What was the score? Do you remember? Do you know what the score was?
Might have been 0-0 or 1-0. Yeah,
phenomenal.
They didn't know. They just left because they'd never seen hockey before. They thought, oh, the game's over, the players are off, and they just left.
So funny.
So there you go. I think that's a pretty clear, concise answer. State of hockey.
Do you see the growth being there?
To be honest, no, because it wasn't natural. It was brought in to just for the Olympics. That's it. They were just wanting to show that they compete at the Olympics. And when growth isn't natural, nothing's going to happen. There's no kids that are watching Kunlun hockey games and saying, I want to play hockey, because no one's going and no one really cares. And when it's artificial growth, nothing's going to happen. That's why I think they're just going to do this until the Olympics. Then after that, they're just going to pack it in and, focus on basketball, which I think is their biggest, sport that they're trying to grow.
Sure.
Okay.
Makes sense. Good stuff. Appreciate the insight on that too.
Of course.
So, all right. At CDN_Speedway asks, and I love this question for the record, verbatim, since you were tight with some of the wings as a child, did you receive any tutelage from any of them? What did you work on and with who?
I didn't really receive any tips from any former players. They weren't really like, they weren't hockey players when they were, hanging out. They were just my dad's coworkers, my dad's friends.
Sure.
So it was never like they would, tell me to hold a stick or anything. It was if when I was a little kid, we'd play mini sticks or something, and it was just for fun. It wasn't, a lesson. It wasn't a coaching experience. It was just my dad's buddies are over and we're just gonna, like, I'm just sitting at the dinner table. So it was something like that. And I never really had a time where, they taught me a trick or something. It was more of just learning myself by looking at them and seeing, how they behave, how they act, how they dress, and just seeing a professional athlete first and foremost, and just right in front of me, and seeing them as a person and not as an athlete. And that's, I think a great lesson that, any kid can pick up from, having Steve Yzerman, Brendan Shanahan, guys like that. Those are great, people to look up to. And that's basically the biggest lesson I learned from those people.
So I've got to know then, follow-up question. Who was the most brutal person to match up against in mini sticks?
Honestly, probably my dad.
Yeah, because he wouldn't take it easy on you, for sure. For sure.
I didn't beat him in anything until I turned, I think, 14. Because when I was 6 or 7 years old, we'd be playing soccer in the backyard. I'd have a breakaway and he'd full on two-leg slide tackle me, so I wouldn't score.
I love it. Well,
that's a good dad.
When I was going to say, in 11 years, when this episode still lives on, and my son Ozzy is watching this show, see, Ozzy, it wasn't just you who the dad didn't let win. So I like it. Poor Ozzy, he'll go up with his little Tykes basketball, and I'll reject him now. I don't care.
Not in my house.
He's got to earn it. He's got to earn it.
You got to teach him early.
I like it. That's good stuff.
That's great.
2 more questions. Thanks for hanging with us, Iggy.
Oh, of course.
This one's funny. So at LGR Win 14 asks, a wine connoisseur, instead of triple overtime, did your father ever consider naming the wine Leaping Dandy? And I feel like I might need to explain that's definitely a Matthew Dandy.
I know.
Reference.
I know, yeah.
No, I didn't mean to you. Oh, yeah. No, I didn't mean to you. I meant to people watching. Okay. I figured you had an idea or two of what that was. All I'll say, if you're watching this, Google triple overtime Igor Larionov 2002 Stanley Cup Finals. You'll see all you need to know. Iggy, on to the question. Any Leaping Dandy or any other alternate names that were out there for that Napa Valley Classic?
I mean, that's a missed opportunity if I've ever seen one.
Well, I think we know.
We need to make some Leaping Dandy shirts.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Absolutely.
I feel awful. Please know I was not questioning your.
Oh, you're good.
Figured
I
you've
was
seen
only
that.
3. I was only 3 when that happened.
Oh, you've never seen a replay before, I'm sure.
No, I don't watch TV. Only read books.
So, well, that brings us to our last question, and our favorite Twitter handle in the world asked this. At THW Grindline may have this question for you. What is your favorite hockey memory? Because I'm sure you can narrow it down to one.
There's a lot of memories, but my favorite memory would be probably my most recent one, and that was my first pro point.
Nice.
And I got the game-winning assist against my former team, which SKA is pretty much the biggest team in Russia. It's like, I don't know, it's like in European soccer, there are big clubs that are good every year because they have the most money. That doesn't really happen in North America sports. So that's like, for example, going up against Barcelona or something and getting the game-winning assist as your first point. So doing that against them, they had pretty much a sold-out crowd, and just that experience. It was one of those things where, like, it was a sold-out crowd, like 15,000 people. It felt like, that's cool. When you play Be a Pro, or when you dream of accomplishing it or doing something and that happens, and you're like, this is it. I've done it. Like I've made it here. And it was that moment where you're just like, wow, I can't believe I'm here right now. And this just happened. It was so surreal, and I don't think I slept a minute that night because I was just over the moon by what happened, the whole experience. I got the post-game press conference. It was just the most incredible experience I've ever had in my life. And if I could go back and relive that day, I would go back every, couple of weeks, but I'm just excited that there's more opportunities for that to happen in the future. And, that's why some days I wake up and I don't really want to go work out. I don't really want to skate. And I just got to think of that feeling, that moment. And just like that, I'm out of bed in the shower, getting ready for practice. So
you gave me goosebumps.
My favorite.
You gave me goosebumps with that story for sure. That's a great story. And I got to ask this because I've just always wondered. So is it weird after you do it on the ice and then you watch a replay of it later? Like, is it weird being able to see it unfold from that perspective when you were in it? Or is it just normal at this point?
I hate watching myself. I'm so critical. I look at myself and it's the weirdest thing, but like I get the game-winning assist against the best team in the country, the best team in the league, the richest team in the league, and I look at myself and I look weird here. Are they trying against me? Are they taking it easy? Just like the dumbest thoughts in my head for no apparent reason. And it's like I've always had that when I look at myself, I feel so good, and people are like, "Yeah, you look good. You're playing well. You're getting points. Like you can't fake that." But when I look at myself from a distance, I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't look real. And I think that's because when you don't see yourself that often, like you see everyone else. So you're used to when you see them on TV, you're like, yeah, I mean, I've seen them so many times.
Sure.
But it's like you don't ever see yourself. You just feel it. And a lot of times your feeling is accurate, but it's a little bit different. And just that little bit of difference makes it feel so weird when you watch yourself on replay or anything like that.
Sure.
Makes me think of Vrana that night when he had the 4 goals and they were trying to make him watch, and he's like, I'm good. Like
I was going to say Nick Suzuki's overtime goal last night. They're like, you want to watch it? And he was like, I guess. Like, they're like, walk us through it. And he's like, yeah, Cole made a great play, and then I got it, and then it went in. Like
he probably was watching it and felt terrible. He's like, "Why is my skating so bad? My socks aren't on right. Like,
he's gonna rip me."
Yeah,
that's awesome.
You're your biggest critic, honestly.
Sure.
When you come to that,
that's human nature, isn't it?
Well, and you should be. If you're not looking to continuously improve and you're not being critical, then what are you doing?
And about everything.
Point, yeah,
about everything. Not even like how you're playing, how your gear is sitting on you, just like all those little things.
Let me tell you, when I'm watching this tomorrow, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm like, I insinuated he didn't know Matthew Dandino. Come on.
Oh, we won't let you forget it ever either.
That's good stuff. Well, we don't mean to keep you any longer, Iggy. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Certainly, congratulations on everything that you have accomplished to this point, and we will be watching. We will be your biggest fans and cheering for you and pulling for you, and certainly wish you the best of luck and with your hockey career and eventually as the director of marketing for the NHL. So
thank you.
That is our show. Thank you, everybody. Please remember, like, subscribe, give us a comment, show us some love. Really appreciate you sacrificing your time to spend it with us. So until next time, have a great week.